You might have heard the phrase karmic debt used like a verdict. Like life is keeping score and you're being punished until you've suffered enough. Carl Jung would have disliked that framing, not because he denied suffering, but because he saw repetition as something more intimate, the psyche trying again and again to become whole. If you look at karmic debt through a Jungian lens, it stops being supernatural and starts being psychological. It's the unpaid bill of what you couldn't feel at the time, the inherited grief you learned to call normal, the attachment wound that quietly chooses your partners for you, the complex that hijacks your reactions before you even know you're reacting. It's not a cosmic punishment. It's a loop, an unconscious pattern that keeps returning because it's looking for integration. Jung noticed that what remains unconscious does not disappear. It repeats, sometimes as fate, sometimes as a type of relationship, sometimes as the same argument in a different kitchen with a different person. And when people say, "Why does this keep happening to me?" they often mean, why does the same part of me keep getting touched? So what does it look like when these debts, these unfinished emotional loops, are almost paid off? Usually it doesn't look like a miracle. It looks like you becoming less available to your own old machinery. The first sign is subtle. You may notice reduced reactivity, not numbness, not repression, more like a small pause appears where there used to be an automatic surge. Someone says the familiar cutting thing, and you feel the heat rise, then it doesn't take over. A younger part of you still shows up, but you're not fully possessed by it. Jung would call this a loosening of identification with the complex. The complex still exists, but it no longer drives the entire vehicle. And if you watch closely, that pause has a particular quality. It feels like space, like your nervous system has stopped treating every trigger as a current emergency. You might still feel hurt, but you don't need to punish, perform, explain, or collapse. You can breathe and stay in your own body. That's not a small thing. It's the psyche reallocating energy away from repetition. The second sign is you feel less compelled to repeat the old dynamics. You may notice it most in relationships. You're not as magnetized by what once felt electric. The charm of the unavailable, the chaos that passes for intimacy, the role where you overfunction and call it love. Suddenly it's not romantic, it's just familiar, like a dream you've already had too many times. In Jungian terms, this is often the persona relaxing its grip. You don't need the old mask as much, the one that keeps you safe by keeping you predictable. As the persona softens, the shadow becomes less threatening. You can admit what you actually want. You can see what you're actually doing. And the moment you see the pattern without flinching, the pattern begins to lose its authority. This is how debt gets paid psychologically. Not by suffering more, but by bringing what's been running you into awareness, until it no longer needs to run at all. Once those first shifts begin, less reactivity, less compulsion, something else starts to happen inside you. It's quieter, but it changes the whole atmosphere of your life. The third sign is emotional neutrality, where there used to be intensity. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means certain things stop owning you. You may think about someone who used to flood your system, an ex, a parent, a friend, a rival. You remember the story, but the story doesn't spike your heart rate the way it used to. There's no rush to rewrite the past in your head. No urge to send the message you know you'll regret. No need to revisit every detail like it's a trial. In Jungian language, it can feel like a projection has withdrawn. The person is no longer carrying your unlived life for you. They're no longer the screen where your shadow plays its favorite movie. They become more ordinary, more human. And sometimes that ordinariness is what finally frees you. This is also when you can tell the difference between a wound and an identity. Earlier in life, the wound can become the personality. I'm the one who was left. I'm the one who was betrayed. I'm the one who never gets chosen. When a karmic pattern is resolving, you may still remember what happened, but you don't have to keep proving it. The psyche stops collecting evidence for an old conclusion. The fourth sign often surprises people because it isn't spiritual. It's practical. You lose interest in revenge, proving, or being understood. You may still want clarity, of course, but the hunger changes. You're no longer trying to win an invisible court case. You're no longer writing speeches in your mind that will finally make someone see you. You realize, sometimes with a little grief, that the person you're arguing with in your head isn't even there. It's an internal figure, an archetypal parent, a critic, a betrayed child, a judge. Jung would say that when you can't stop needing someone's recognition, you might not be dealing with them at all. You might be dealing with a complex, an emotionally charged cluster of memories and meanings. The complex wants the world to repay it. It wants the past to apologize. It wants the missing love to arrive retroactively. But as the debt gets paid, you start to reclaim responsibility for your projections. Not in a blamey way, in a grown way. You notice, I made them into the solution, or I made them into the villain. And you begin to take back the energy you tied up in that role. That's why you feel less pulled into drama. Drama requires a certain kind of participation, the willingness to be hooked, to be activated, to hand your center away. When your psyche is integrating, you still see the bait, but you don't feel obligated to bite. This isn't you becoming cold, it's you becoming less available to repetition. The self, the Jungian center of wholeness, doesn't shout, it doesn't argue, it doesn't need to be right. It simply draws you toward what is real. The fifth sign is the one people rarely name because it doesn't feel like a breakthrough. It feels like a quiet return of your own attention. You may notice that the old story still exists, but it no longer asks to be rehearsed. You can remember what happened without needing to live there. The mind stops circling the same scenes, trying to squeeze a different ending out of them. And when the memory comes up, it lands with less authority, as if it's finally been placed in the past, instead of secretly running the present. In Jung's language, it's the difference between having a history and being inhabited by it. This is where the debt is almost paid, not to some external force, but to your own psyche. The parts of you that were pushed down, split off, or trained to stay quiet begin to feel included. Not fixed, included. You stop treating certain emotions as evidence that something is wrong with you. Anger becomes information instead of a threat. Sadness becomes a season instead of an identity. Even fear becomes something you can hold, rather than something you must obey. You might notice your inner life becoming less theatrical. The need for a big conclusion fades. There's less urgency to declare what it all meant. You don't have to turn every pain into a lesson immediately. You can let things be unresolved without turning that into failure. And something else shifts, almost without your consent. You stop using people as symbolic stand-ins. Earlier, it can feel like every difficult relationship is about the other person. But as individuation deepens, you start seeing the archetypal layers underneath. This person isn't only this person, they've been carrying an image. The abandoning parent, the critic, the one who never chooses you, the one you have to convince. When the debt is being paid, you begin withdrawing those projections with more honesty. You still see the other person clearly, sometimes more clearly than before. But you don't ask them to complete a sentence that began in childhood. That's the mature part. You stop recruiting the world to resolve what the psyche is finally willing to face. This often comes with a strange kind of peace that isn't happy. It's steadier than that. You feel less pulled toward intensity for its own sake. You're less interested in being right. less interested in being the victim or the hero. The persona, your social mask, doesn't have to work as hard. You can be a little more ordinary without feeling like you're disappearing. And in that ordinariness, energy returns. Not as constant excitement, but as availability.